Hi everybody, I'm Butch Stearns and welcome in to CMS-Connected, the web content management industry's only news commentary show. That's right, I am Butch Stearns, your co-host, along with Scott Lear of Digital Lewer.
We're going to start out like that right off the top.
Of Digital Clarity Group. How you doing, Scott?
I'm good, Butch. How are you?
You're going to be better when you hear the subject of today's show.
All right.
We are talking about the big data shift. That's what we were talking about, opening new doors and creating new possibilities. And let me tell you what else we have coming up in this show to focus on the big data shift. Seth Earley from Earley & Associates will be joining Scott and I in studio to talk about that and give his take on that. Also, Bryan Ruby in our Spotlight segment will be Skyping in to review Magnolia CMS. And we will have all kinds of other fun stuff, questions from our audience, and all kinds of things. But first, let me welcome once again Scott Lewer from Digital Clarity Group. Scott, before we start, for people that don't know you and don't know DCG, what's Digital Clarity Group all about?
Sure. So we are an independent industry analyst firm, and we focus on trying to help organizations make this digital transformation, this notion of digital disruption and all these requirements for organizations to change themselves and transform themselves. We help them see that roadmap.
And you and I have been co-hosting this show, CMS-Connected, the web content management industry's only news commentary show, for a long time now. And we look at today's subject, big data, opening new doors and creating new possibilities. You mentioned the notion of it, but let's talk about the true definition of it. Let's tease the rest of the show. What's important to you about big data in this industry?
Listen, I love the idea of big data from the standpoint of looking at data and looking at analytics to help us make decisions. There's so much information out there. Why wouldn't we take advantage of it? Certainly the consumers are, right? That's the position organizations are in. How would you like to be a guy at Best Buy who's selling stuff? The consumer knows more, the customer knows more than they do, and they have it at their fingertips, right? So big data is about helping organizations focus on making meaningful insights out of that data. However, the issues that we'll talk about here today is there can be an over-focus on that, and companies can get a little bit too caught up in the hype, and I think we need to figure out how to help them. Let's dispel a little bit of rumors, and let's help them make some pragmatic choices about how to move forward.
All right, coming up, our 5 top news stories. Seth Earley joins us in studio. Bryan Ruby by Skype. We'll put Scott Lewer on the clock for our rapid fire segment at the end of the show. But before we do any of that, time right now to take a minute to thank our lead sponsors for CMS-Connected. Our first lead sponsor is Falcon Software. The people at Falcon Software can provide you with expert advice and integration solutions for all your creative web design, web content management, and e-commerce, social or mobile needs. That's Falcon Software. Our other lead sponsor, Digital Clarity Group. As we talked about, DCG is a research and advisory firm focused on navigating organizations through the digital transformation process. Also, for viewers out there, again, our pats on the back to Falcon Software and Digital Clarity Group. For those of you watching the show, right down below the screen in the player, I encourage you to download the white paper on completing the global user experience. You can just click on it and download it. It's been supplied to us by eSpirit CMS, and again, it's located at the bottom of your screen. So, time for our top 5 news stories, or we've decided these are 5 of the top news stories in the industry today.
Top 5 today.
Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, let's start with story number 1, news item number 1. Sitecore and Microsoft Dynamics joining forces to integrate platforms. Here's the story. Sitecore customers and Microsoft Dynamics users, Sitecore has announced they're partnering with Microsoft to integrate their platform with Microsoft Dynamics. A quote from Darren Guarnaccia, Chief Strategy Officer at Sitecore: "In the increasingly competitive e-commerce landscape, retailers need to make customer experiences seamless across every channel, whether they're in the store or online. This joint solution will bridge the gap in-store and digital experience. When combined with Microsoft Dynamics end-to-end omni-channel retail platform, retailers acquire power to offer the right product at the right time in the right context, driving sales and delighting customers." Do you agree with all of that? And what do you like about this partnership to get these two in that direction?
Last month, we gave 5 predictions, right, for the coming year. And one of them was content and commerce are going to continue to come together. This is just another further movement in that direction. So Dynamics is not only a commerce platform, but it's also CRM and analytics and things like that. And so I think this partnership, first of all, let's just say and be really clear that since 2010, Microsoft and Sitecore have had a relationship and an integration of these two products. This was an announcement at NRF, specifically a retail trade show, right, for how to do essentially commerce digitally. And they basically announced this partnership, and Microsoft announced a partnership with another firm as well, Vantiv, that offers a mobile POS, a point of sale system as well. So they basically are figuring out how can they make their software, they already have a nice stronghold of the retail kind of world there, how can they basically make their commerce platform that much more relevant for folks out there who are trying to conduct online retail? And they basically thought Sitecore brings them this, this ability to tailor the experience and to personalize the experience, and all that we know Sitecore for being able to do. And the second one is bring that intelligence to the point and being able to help them make tailored experiences and transactions. And the second one is this mobile POS, so that they actually truly can blend that analog and digital experience together.
So what do you like about the fact that they integrated this platform with Microsoft Dynamics? What's unique about that? What's good about that for Sitecore? They picked the right vendor, didn't they?
I mean, it's natural.
Right partner.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think, like I say, we've seen Sitecore in the news recently about their acquisition of Commerce Server as a commerce platform. Also a former Microsoft, that was a former Microsoft product, right? So again, these guys have been walking down this path for a long time. Sitecore is completely built on the Microsoft stack, and I think this was more so than news for Sitecore customers, this was news for Microsoft customers that have been sitting and working with Dynamics, and it hasn't been able to create that tailored experience because commerce platforms tend to stink at content. We've said this before. And so it was them reaching out for who do they think is the best and brightest that's built on their platform that would be a good Microsoft partner to pull in to help them meet that challenge of creating dynamic, personalized, tailored experiences.
News item number 2 on this edition of CMS Connected has to do with hirings and the effect or the image or perception of what those hirings mean. And we turn to story about Box as they continue to add executives to their core. This story comes from Ron Miller from Fierce Content Management, who writes about Box's steady march towards, according to Ron, becoming a big boy company and taking the Huggies off, if you will. Ron writes that the news that their latest hire, Graham Younger, who is SAP's cloud chief, was brought on board to be Box's executive vice president of worldwide field operations. And this hire of Graham Younger, former SAP cloud chief, comes on the heels of last week's hiring of Manjit Singh, the former CIO of the Las Vegas Sands and Chiquita Brands International, who was hired to run Box's consulting arm. Scott, first of all, let's talk about this from the investor world. According to Ron Miller of Fierce Content Management, this sends a message that for a number of years they're continuing to ascend toward an inevitable IPO, and that hiring another executive from a large company this week, it's squarely aimed at presenting a more mature front to the investment world. Does it? Is it? Yeah. As far as to the investment world, in your opinion?
I think it does, and I think you're right. They were squarely trying to do two things with this move. Well, not just with this move, but within many of the moves. This is a series of hires they've made over a number of years. I don't think this is something new. The story, to be honest, about Box's growing up, it's a little played. I think they've been there for a while now. They brought in Whitney Bach, Jolie Urton, we interact with a lot. She's the head of AR. She came from Oracle. Whitney came from EMC. She was a chief marketing officer at EMC. Dan Levin is her COO. So the Graham
Younger hire, your point is just, that's just part of the story.
Yeah.
You disagree a little bit with Ron and his perspective that they've all of a sudden grown up.
Right.
They've been growing up for a while, is your point.
And I think he says that, but you know, it's the storyline. I just think it's a played storyline. I think the more interesting thing is the point that you make too. One is, for certain, they are courting the financial analysts out there in terms of setting themselves up for a great valuation for an IPO. I think, and my colleague Tim Walters was actually at Boxworks over in Europe a few weeks ago, might have even been last week, and he was saying that it was just super obvious. They wore on their shirt sleeve all the comments that they were making to basically really build this IPO up without necessarily talking about IPO. It was about how many really big customers have moved onto their platform, and it was just like, he felt like it was a little over the top from that perspective. I'm not sure that that necessarily helps them with their second thing, though, which is their second big point, and should be first and foremost for them, is appealing to the enterprise. And Ron makes that point here as well, but they're trying to disrupt the incumbents who are in there that own the kind of document management landscape within large enterprises. And if you're trying to court them, I'm not so sure that telling them that we're focused on going IPO is necessarily the right message. I mean, frankly, that means you're about to go through a fair amount of turmoil, and your eye is not necessarily on the ball that is focused on delivering me the best product possible.
All right, final quick point about this one. Graham Younger, SAP's former cloud chief.
Yeah.
What does this particular hiring indicate, even though, as you just mentioned, it's been a string of hirings, but what is, to you, what's the significance of them hiring SAP's former cloud chief?
Yeah, I think, as you say, this is about trying to appeal to the enterprises who are used to buying from brands and people that they really know well. Listen, Box doesn't need to learn cloud from anybody, okay? They don't need to learn from Graham Younger, that's for sure. They were way out there in the beginning of cloud, so I don't think that they're bringing him on necessarily for that expertise. It's those relationships, it's that big boy mentality that we're coming to the enterprise and we know what the enterprise needs, we've served the enterprise in the past, all of that kind of stuff. I think another interesting thing, though, that's going on with them is they're gearing up to provide services now more. They need to be able to help implement their product in large organizations and large enterprises. I think advice to them is don't just focus on how you implement that, but how you're going to help enterprises realize the value of your product and ensure that it doesn't just become another file system in the cloud.
For both of our next two stories here on this edition of CMS Connected in our news segment, we turn to research and articles written by Digital Clarity Group, and Scott, by colleagues of yours. The first one is Jill Finger Gibson, and the article is, or the title of the news story, Service Provider Consolidation in 2014. It's happening, so get ready. And what Jill writes in an article posted on the Digital Clarity Group website is that Microsoft has an eye-popping $1.3 billion marketing budget, and sort of the domino effect from there is agencies everywhere are saying, well, how do I get a part of that $1.3 billion? And they're all going for it. According to Jill, she says, get ready, folks. More companies will follow Microsoft's example. Is this a trend? Do you agree with Jill saying this is a trend?
I agree 100% with what Jill's saying, but I think most would. The question is, why is she right? So service providers and large organizations, they've been acquiring, look at WPP and Publicis and these large, huge, kind of ultra large agencies, these have been making acquisitions for years. And so, okay, the question is this just more of the same? The key to the article and what she's writing about here is why. Why is it happening, and why is she predicting what's going on? And then how will it be different than just kind of the acquisitions that have happened in the past? The point that's being made about Microsoft, and there's a lot of them out there, but maybe they're not all 1.3 billion, but we're running an AOR selection for a $500 million stake. There's a lot of those opportunities out there. And the point of the article is not that Microsoft is out to market. The point of the article is that what Microsoft realized is that in order to completely implement customer experience management in a way that's going to actually be relevant, it's not just a single line of business, it's not just a marketing function, it requires an entire organizational shift. They've put new people in power. It is a top-down, gotta buy in from the top approach that is required, and requires a fair amount of restructuring, repositioning, and re-understanding of what you do. Now, what that does is that tends to make them question some of the existing relationships and why they got into them in the first place. That's why they're going out. It's not that they're dissatisfied with their existing experience of the work that they're getting from the agency. It's that they need something bigger and broader than what they were getting, right? And from looking through a bit of a different lens. Agencies, in response to this, because it's happening way more than at Microsoft, at many large organizations, are realizing that the skills that they bring to bear are no longer just required to be creative and tech savvy. They need to be able to help with organizational change. They need to be able to help with all organizational training and communication throughout to help line employees understand how to deliver top-notch experiences for customers that are in line with what the organization's new mantra is. This requires way more than creative and technology, and so that's what they're doing, is they're going out and figuring out how can we bring in these skills? How can we change our process and approach to every project that we do to encompass a lot of these approaches and what's required?
So a little bit more about this shift and why we're seeing this major shift in the service provider-buyer relationship. You painted a picture that it's not just heads of lines of business, it's buyers from the top that are coming here. The customer experience continues to become more and more important, and that the mandates are coming from within. So that the high-level decision makers are coming in and saying, no, we need this, the latest in customer experience.
That's right.
Why that shift? Why? Yeah, a little more on that.
Because consumers demand it. Right? We talk about this notion of consumer empowerment theory. It's no theory. You and I both, we demand way more from suppliers of ours, whether it be how we get our movies delivered to us, whether it be the experience that we have, the buying experience that needs to be either easy. Zappos made us realize that we should be able to return anything on the dollar. I mean, like, our expectations have significantly changed. And digital technologies and capabilities have changed how organizations deliver those experiences. It's not just that it's all about new, innovative digital delivery of the experience, but it's all about also how they use digital to transform and make more efficient and effective their organization to be able to deliver.
Quick comment from a B2B level,
Yeah,
because we oftentimes talk about
You're
the
right.
end user
Yep,
and the consumer, but when it comes to customer experience, when it comes to the buyers in this shift is going on because the customers, and the whole chain of that and all that's involved with that.
I say this often, a B is composed of a whole bunch of C's. You and me, we work for companies, we are the buyers. Our individual expectations of what it's like to interact with any company, even kicking back in our couch at night and how we interact with somebody, we bring that into work every day. Talk about the notion of BYOD, all of those things. It's all about the empowerment of the consumer, the empowerment of the buyer, the empowerment of the employee, and their expectations, how they've moved and how organizations have to react.
All right, for our next story, IBM, a new shade of blue. We turn to DCG's Kathy McKnight, analyst within Digital Clarity Group, true Toronto Maple Leafs fan. Speaking of a shade of blue, we won't hold that against her. It's a Bruins fan here. But anyway, she writes an article called IBM, a new shade of blue. And in the article, she starts it by focusing in on IBM Connect in Orlando that happened recently. And she says it marks the beginning of another year of vendor conferences filled with enthusiastic announcements of technological innovation, new services, and/or strategic acquisitions that combined mean new technology and service offerings for the host company. She talks specifically, let's talk about the event, first of all, IBM Connect 2014. The article is focused on a new shade of blue. Well, IBM for years has at least been viewed as the company that's, they're IBM. They're tried and true. Their systems work. They're a blue chip, no pun intended. Blah blah blah. To the title of her article, "A New Shade of Blue," IBM Connect 2014. They had American authors, tunes from American authors welcoming the crowd in Orlando. They were trying to be very hip. They had Scott Adams of Dilbert comic fame to the stage. And they did all kinds of fun. What does this indicate to you? What's Kathy saying here?
I think, listen, we talked about Box earlier and how they're trying to disrupt the market. IBM is one of the ones they're trying to disrupt. This is what IBM has to do to continue to stay relevant to its audiences. I mean, they right now have a sea of customers who it was in to buy blue. You couldn't be fired or whatever if you hired, IBM or whatever it was, however the moniker went. They're dealing with a bunch of those customers 5, 10, 20 years later right now, and those customers are looking around going, I got Box over here. I just got invited to this really hip conference that Box doing. That guy's running around the stage with sneakers on and whatever else, right? And they're in Levy. Same sort of a thing. They did that, as a matter of fact. They pulled out the sneakers with the suit, and they had Jay Baer up there talking and telling great stuff, and they had Seth Meyers in, she didn't mention, but he was telling some great jokes. It was a fun event. It was all about kind of uplifting, and you definitely had this notion that they were really trying to change. And it didn't feel fake, by the way. It felt natural.
So my question to you, and Kathy writes about this, is about the significance of the particular, the whole of the announcements that were made at IBM Connect 2014, or if you choose a significant one that was announced. And as Kathy writes, to her count, there were 15 major announcements on day one of IBM Connect 2014, including IBM's Mail Next, their Connexa talent suite, and investments in SaaS Playground. Again, what's your comment about the significance?
I think there might have been 40. I mean, literally over the course of the couple of days or whatever. And I was there as well. I think there are a couple of things. Number one, they are trying to transform their products. I mean, I've often, when I've sat in those before, I think I tweeted something about like, is this a joke? Like, aren't we talking about Lotus Notes here? When we talk about email at IBM, like that's, everybody that I know that's on Lotus Notes has a bad experience with it, and it is the enterprise joke. But they've relaunched this Mail Next, which is this SaaS play, collaborative environment where it brings in your social, it brings in your email, it helps you prioritize and focus, which I really need, on what things to answer and what to take action on. It's really looking good. I think that's one big announcement is their Mail Next, and I gave some comments to Dom Nicastro of CMS Wire on an article that he wrote about it. Number two is the Connexa platform, the smarter workforce. I think IBM rightly and smartly does focus on how to manage your organization. As we've said, customer experience is much more about an entire organizational shift, and having products like that and not just focusing on digital experiences, I think, is a really good thing. And then number three is they talked about their new IBM's global services, their new interactive group, that they're hiring 500 or maybe 5,000, but a whole lot of these basically people who are going to focus on interactive experiences and working in new ways and opening laboratories and all kinds of stuff. So pretty neat stuff, I think. All things that you need to do.
I mentioned off the top of the show, and I'll remind viewers to the show, that down below us you can click on the eSpirit CMS white paper, completing the global user experience. I think this is a good opportunity, coming off the two DCG stories, to remind folks or let folks know, Scott, that you have two DCG guides when it comes to customer experience management, one on North America and one on Europe. The North America one's out already, and the Europe one's coming out in March, is that correct?
Yeah, correct. So we really, because we place so much emphasis on the team, and it's not just about the technology, helping organizations find the relationships that they need to make with what we call service providers, agencies, and integrators. We launched back in August one that was focused on 42 in North America, and we're about to launch one that focuses on 47 in Europe. IBM Global Services will be one of the ones. And then, so both of those are available. The second one is coming out at the end of March here. And then we've also got a new paper that's talking about the experience of customer experience management. What does it mean? It's just a paper.
All right, for our news item number 5 on this edition of CMS Connected, we start to transition into the subject of this show in particular, and that's big data and the shift to big data. And the title of this is Who Leads the Big Data Market? Probably not who you think. This comes from research that was done by the analysts at Wikibon on big data revenues. And it's from an article written by Virginia Bacchatis from Brilliant Leap. And in her article on big data thoughts and figures, quoting from this report put out by the analysts at Wikibon on the big data revenues, she lists some interesting insights into it. First of all, when we look at big data revenues, I don't think it's a big surprise on who leads. It's IBM, HP, Dell in this order, SAP, Teradata, Oracle, and SAS Institute. Any surprise on 1 through 7 there on who leads in big data revenues?
I think her point is that it should have been, most people would think that it's the Hadoops and that it's other that kind of really associated with true NoSQL databases that are able and agile and all those sorts of things. I think what this is what we talked about at the top, that I was hung up for a really long time on the notion, I was really annoyed with the whole big data concept. I've gotten over it, I've gone to therapy. The point is that I was hung up on it because big data, as it's defined, is basically so much data that traditional databases, this notion of relational databases, can't even handle it. That's how massive the amount of data that we're talking about. More than terabytes, we're talking about exabytes, right? And that's just not relevant to 99% of the organizations out there. So what these guys, so basically it's what's being considered big data. And so when they're looking at these revenues, it's not really sales of databases that work in that way. It's not just the NoSQL products. Big data has started to mean basically every decision-making engine that you need based on a bunch of data, which we've been doing for a really long time. And I like the concept now because it helps people to focus on making data-driven decisions, and that's great. But this is not kind of the purest version of the sales in true word of big data.
This
right?
big data therapy, is it ongoing?
It is. I have a lot. There's a lot of topics on my list for
my name is
therapy.
Scott.
Yes, and I hate the concept. Yes, no, yes, but we've had a lot of shows on big data. We had Frank Gilbane on like a year or 2 years ago, and we kind of had this debate. And look, I'm over it though.
Subject, and we're going to get into it with Seth Earley
Yeah,
in a little bit. One more comment on this story. I thought one of the other interesting, and you sort of alluded to this, that Virginia writes about is IBM leads the field, as we said, in big data revenues. But when the report breaks it down by hardware, software, and services, and even after you subtract IBM's big data related hardware revenues from its big data revenue total, it still beats everyone in the field.
That's the thing, but that's the part that, as an incumbent, they're trying to hold on and protect that, right? Because there's an awful lot of people nipping at their heels. And of course, we're gonna see most of the spend with people's existing vendors, with their existing relationships, and trying to figure out how can you help me solve about this problem that I just read about in Harvard Business Review.
All right, so coming up, we continue to talk about the big data shift. And we also talk specifically about the opening of new doors with that and the new possibilities that are created. Seth Earley from Earley & Associates will join us in studio momentarily to do that. But before we do, let's take a quick break and hear from Sitefinity and Kentico. CMS-Connected, the web content management's only news commentary show, rolls on.
Telerik Sitefinity CMS is an online platform designed to align collaboration and deliver fast results for any requirement. It's a system that empowers businesses by streamlining content management centrally for any campaign, website, or channel. Telerik Sitefinity CMS brings your creative ideas and content to the mobile front easily with a powerful, responsive engine and multi-strategy mobile arsenal built right in. Using out-of-the-box features, you can reuse your content on any delivery channel, interact with your audience through social media, and even integrate directly with third-party systems. How does this all work? By understanding the nature of your content, Telerik Sitefinity CMS allows you to build once, deliver anywhere, using an advanced feature set and state-of-the-art drag-and-drop interface that's powerful by default and extensible by design. You can build gorgeous, blazing fast websites and get the results that over 10,000 of the most innovative companies are already enjoying. Go to Sitefinity.com now and try it for free. Telerik Sitefinity CMS, winning customer experiences.
Businesses today demand a powerful web content management and online marketing platform that can provide the best value at an affordable price with unlimited website possibilities. Kentico, the .NET Enterprise Marketing Solution and web content management platform of choice, powers more than 12,000 websites in over 84 countries, which means you get a stable, well-tested solution. Fully loaded with over 350 web parts and controls and more than 80 extensible modules. Kentico provides you with a fully integrated solution for building your online presence and running successful online marketing campaigns. It allows you to quickly launch an effective B2B or B2C site, intranet, online store, or branded online community, fully integrated with Facebook and Twitter. Test drive Kentico EMS today to get a complete appreciation of all its powerful features and capabilities.
Welcome back to CMS-Connected, the web content management industry's only news commentary show. We're talking today, myself, Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network, co-host along with Scott Lewer of Digital Clarity Group. We are talking about the shift in big data and the opening of new doors and the possibilities that are being created for that. And to talk more about that subject, we bring in Seth Earley from Earley & Associates. Seth, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Nice to see you.
Yeah, we got you in the hot seat,
Yeah,
so
you
you're
do.
going
You got me
back
right in
and forth.
between.
So stay on me for a couple of seconds. For people that don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Earley & Associates.
So actually, Earley & Associates has been in business for about 20 years. This is actually our 20th year, interestingly. So yeah, I know, it's gone very quickly. And the work that we've done is mostly focusing on data from the perspective of unstructured content, information architecture, metadata, taxonomy, and then all of the different types of systems and processes that feeds into.
So to get right into our subject, let's talk about that. And let me ask you this basic question, because I always like people that are experts in the field of big data. simplify it for us. Give us your definition today of big data.
Okay. So, you know, there's a technical view of this. So traditionally when people talked about big data, they're talking about enormous amounts of data, really large amounts. So, you know, the amount of the information that Walmart deals with and information that was, you mentioned this before, too big to be handled by traditional types of relational database systems. So they needed new ways to deal with that. But now that definition has evolved, right? Because most organizations are dealing with enormous amounts of information coming from many different sources. So clickstream data, customer information that's coming from multiple marketing systems, any type of an industry that deals with a lot of information like healthcare, you know, patient records, electronic medical records, claims information. So when you start looking at that, and you start looking at all these different sources of information, it's the volume of information, it's the variety, the velocity, the fact that it changes very, very quickly. Social data, social graph data, that's another area. So there's lots of different sources of information that enterprises are dealing with. A huge proliferation of applications. When you look at the typical marketing suite that an organization needs to deal with, they deal with customer relationship management systems and web content management systems and email marketing systems and social media systems and marketing asset management, marketing resource management, digital asset management. You go on, and all of these systems are kicking off streams of information, streams of data, and all of that behavioral information where the customer is interacting will kick off streams of data. And it's a matter of how do you deal with that? How do you interpret it? How do you make sense of it? How do you use it to achieve some kind of a business outcome? So that's really where we start thinking about it in a typical day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that purist definition that I alluded to and that you described here was much more fake. You know, one would think if that were the case, that the challenges associated were kind of more about where do I store it, how do I access it, all of that. And what you're talking about, which is relevant regardless about the amount of size of it, is how to get inferences from it. How do I glean insights from all this information?
That's right. So one organization that we worked with is using it from a predictive perspective. So it's a banking organization. They found that certain things that customers do in terms of their behaviors will indicate whether they're going to leave the bank, right? And then they can predict, they can say, okay, we're seeing these customers with these kinds of behaviors. I can do something. I can have some kind of intervention, right? I can call on them. I can send them an offer. I can reduce their overdraft charge. I can do something that's going to prevent them from defecting to another bank. That's a predictive analytic, and that's very, very powerful.
So Bryan, we're talking about big data, the shift in big data. This is CMS-Connected, the web content management industry's only news commentary show. My name is Butch Stearns of the Pulse Network. Scott Lewer, the co-host from Digital Clarity Group, is alongside. We're joined in studio by Seth Earley from Earley Associates. How has big data changed your world in particular?
Well, what's interesting about our world, you know, we're a consulting firm, so we have to deal with our customers and helping them make sense of this. And for the most part, you know, what we're doing is we're giving them the mechanisms to get their house in order, to help them cut across multiple systems and processes. In other words, you know, the work that we've done has always been important in and of itself in terms of making sense of unstructured information or making it easier to do business intelligence. But now it's essential. It's part of the table stakes, so to speak. So organizations are looking to us to help them, you know, get their house in order to cut across multiple silos of information and be consistent with language and terminology.
Right, and you mentioned the V's, the volume, the velocity, the variety, and how about the veracity of it? I hear IBM talk about that all the time, meaning that, you know, to me, one of the big things about big data is that there's just so much more of it now. Or you think of us as individuals, the data we create, and then you think of a business. So somebody said this to me a long time ago. What it's really about is getting the right information in the right hands of the right people at the right time. So when you think of it that way, when you talk about how it's changed your world, I find it interesting what you said, because add on now times a million. Oh, like when we were kids, times infinity, because you just create so much more data.
Yeah, you know, and it really is interesting when you think about an individual, and you just mentioned that we kick off lots of data on our day-to-day basis, right? When we're shopping online, when we're making phone calls, when we're traveling, we carry iPhones, and these iPhones are kicking off information for every one of those applications is tracking us. Geofencing is an interesting concept because what you can start to do now is say, okay, here's a person who is a female, 30 to 35 years, has a graduate degree, drives a BMW, likes yoga and green products, and now they're in the neighborhood of this organization that I can now tailor a message to her. Think of all that data. Think of all of that context, but it's limitless. I mean, think of all the different contexts that you're in when you go about your day-to-day work or your day-to-day activities. So making sense of that is what
So
what
for
is
both
important.
of you guys, I'm an executive. I'm dealing with this, as you painted the picture, Scott. Consumers have all the power now, right? And if it's a B2B environment, I need to empower my supply chain to be able to address those needs. So how do I not get overwhelmed? How do I address this shift? I know that's a loaded question. How about from both of you? How do we begin that?
Sure. Okay,
You wanna
I can
take
talk.
it?
I think the
Yeah.
first thing is it's the very similar question to how do you eat an elephant, right? You just take one bite at a time, and I think there are some fundamental kind of pillars of this. The first thing is, first and foremost, is you cannot just react based on reading an HBR article that says suddenly this is really important to you and your entire decision-making process and the way that you work has to fundamentally transform to incorporate data when the processes that you had in place before didn't necessarily.
I call that managing by magazine article.
There you go. I think that's great. You should write about that if you have it. I just think overall the biggest challenge people have is they just feel like, oh my gosh, I've got to react.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, everybody's doing this. Oh
Right.
my, and the reality is that everybody isn't necessarily
Right.
doing it. And you have some things that you focus on that you do really well, that make you unique, that make your customers want to use your products or services or whatever. So how can you use data to, in various parts of it, make more efficient your delivery process, your insight about what your customers want so that it affects your product planning processes? So it's basically where to find the pockets and
Right.
places that
That's right.
basically help to make you do what you do better.
And I totally agree with you. And I think that the fear sometimes that causes people to react, to say, oh, I got to do this, we're going to miss the boat. Now that's a valid fear, right? Because a lot of organizations have missed the boat when they miss technology shifts. And this is a very big technology shift. But the problem is, it's not getting overwhelmed and not feeling like you have to do something right away. It's just what you said, Scott. It's focusing on where can you have a value that you can add to your process, and how does data help you get there?
That's
so
right.
personalizing that product experience, improving the service experience, getting people that information as they need it. And it's really focusing on that very specific set of processes and saying, how can we impact this, and what data do we already have, and how can we make sense of it? Here's something that's really interesting. There's a study the other day that I read that talked about how most organizations are not even making sense of the call center information that they have,
Yeah,
right?
it's just-
So they have all this data. They know what these customer preferences are. They don't act on it.
That's right.
So tell me what a lot of new data is going to do for you when you're not even acting on the data that you have.
Exactly.
Well, from what I'm hearing you both say, it sounds like for advice for executives, it's a simple business principle. If you believe in the 80-20 rule that 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers, don't try to reinvent the wheel and put resources towards or find data and focus on data that's not producing revenue for you. You said find the pockets, Scott, and you talked about making it simple and focusing on that point. So you want to try to improve your processes and be more efficient with things that are producing revenue for your business and making your business grow at this point, right?
That's right. It's optimizing what you have, and it's making that business case. It's aligning the business case with you're building a capability, right? And this capability is data and information supports something. It supports a process. And that process is aligned with some capability, right? So whether it's a customer service process or customer acquisition or whatever it might be, and that has to be aligned with the objectives of the organization. So when you have that alignment, when you have that linkage, you can justify things and you can get people to pay attention. That's the other part that happens here. People get overwhelmed, right? They get overloaded. It's like, oh God, I got to think about this now. I already have plenty of things to do. I can't focus on that. I can't worry about it. Like, please don't overwhelm me. But what we're saying is, this is what you're doing anyway, okay? We're going to make it better by helping you understand these insights from this information about this process, and it's that improvement. It's not like squirrel, like shiny bit, right? It's not like, oh, there's a technology, I need to jump on it.
Right.
It's really aligning it with an existing process where you have to achieve something and you can justify that.
And so your focus, historically, I know that you've helped a lot of organizations develop taxonomies, and a lot of this has been about how you can fundamentally set this up so that dynamically I can get the information when I need it,
That's
whether
right.
it's delivering it through a content management
That's
system
right.
or whether it's accessing data in a large organization. So what, from in terms of kind of your core offering then, how are you helping people, besides just preaching to them and
Sure.
saying,
Right.
this isn't too big, and there's the first counseling session we talked about,
Right,
I'm in
right.
some therapy, I'd imagine you have
I'm
a couch
setting
too.
up a support group, by the way.
Yes,
So,
good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I'll
great.
give you the information
I'll-
on that. Big data
It's a
support.
great question. And where do I start if I'm an
Yeah.
executive?
Yeah. So, what we see is, again, it's trying to make sense of what you have today. And many times what we'll find is that organizations will have a source of data and they don't know how to interpret it, right? So they'll have, say, a voice of the customer data.
Yeah, we'll
which
go
is-
back to the call
Sure.
center
Yeah,
that you
call
talked
center,
about. Right, so
absolutely,
go there.
call center data.
Yeah, use
so,
that example.
so that's a great example. So part of one of the things that we did for an insurance company is we said, let's mine the chat data from the call center, because they have chat, they do phone calls, but then they also do chats, right? So they'll ask a question before they call. And so what we wanted to do is say, well, what are the issues that are coming up in chats and how can we mine that and really get a sense of it? And then put that back into the search tools and the customer self-service tools in order to refine those processes. So identifying the issues from chat, and again, it's one of those things where if you had your call center processes right, you would probably be harvesting that in any case. But this is cutting across large amounts of information and then looking for the emergent topics, right? So there's text analytics in there as well. Also doing speech to text, right? So a lot of those call center sessions would be recorded. And essentially what you can do is convert the recordings to text and then mine that text and look for the emergent types of topics that come up and say, okay, here's something that we're not servicing our customer on. Here's a problematic area. This is where we can intervene on the website or the self-service or search or whatever it might be to improve that process. So it's looking for those insights from large amounts of data and then surfacing that back to the customer.
We are talking today on CMS Connected about the shift in big data, about the opportunities that are being created in the marketplace and in different industries, because as Seth preaches all the time, and Scott, that big data is about all industries. It's not germane to just one industry. And you may be in an industry like finance or healthcare where there's compliance issues, if that's the case, or you may be in a very transactional situation in retail or whatever, or something like that. I think the needs are always the same. So let's talk from the marketplace standpoint. What does this mean for customer experience and competitive advantage in the marketplace?
Sure. So I think there's a lot of opportunities in terms of customer experience, and they range everywhere from, again, getting that right information to people as they are looking for information on the website. So segmenting your audiences according to lots of different attributes and parameters. And think about it this way. A customer experience is about more than a website, right? It's about all those internal processes that are upstream that are supporting that digital experience. So if you're, the LB GUPS customer experience, customer lifecycle, learn, buy, get, use, pay, support, used a lot in telecom and others. I learn about a product through some kind of outbound marketing, right? That's one system. Maybe there's outbound marketing, maybe there's website. I buy it through an e-commerce system, and that e-commerce system is giving me other information. I may use it and in telecom, you're actually using the product, so I have other systems that will support that. And then paying for it, you're interacting with accounting systems, and there are people in the back end who are supporting that. You're dealing with call centers, you're dealing with service app. So in each case, there's multiple systems that you're actually interacting with, right? You may be interacting through the website, you may be interacting through call centers, but there's lots of systems. So what you can do with big data is you can start to optimize that by looking at that voice of the customer information, by processing the surveys, processing social media, right? At every step of the process, people are saying something, right? They're talking about your service. They're talking about the fact that your product, is good or bad or indifferent. They're talking about the quality of the call center and the quality of the website. They're having those conversations. So you can harvest that across each step of that process, and you can get insights that actually can be fed into your internal processes. So in other words, you can mine what's going on with voice of the customer and social media and text analytics from lots of different channels to monitor how you're doing internally, right? And those kinds of scorecards can give you a lot of feedback. With one organization, they found that their internal call center was saying that, oh, first time call resolution, we're doing that 80% of the time. Guess what the customers were saying? That most of the time they were not getting first call resolution. They were doing 2 and 3 and 4 calls, right? So that's what the survey data was saying, but the internal process was saying something different, right? Which are you going to believe? You have to say, this is another data point, but we have lots of those data points across all those processes. So we can build scorecards that will measure our internal processes by cutting across all of these different areas, right?
Yep, I think we've talked, a lot of the discussion of the last 10 minutes has been about that this is not just a technology issue,
Oh, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It's so much more a state of mind. Do I even know that we have data that can help me make this decision in a more informed way? If so, do I know how to go tap into it? And then can I act accordingly? Can I optimize then my decision afterward by checking back? So it's a big state of mind, I understand. But just talking technically for a bit, are technologies yet set up to kind of really be able to serve customers in a way that they kind of want to with this insight and information? In other words, they're not using, are suddenly call center people using a different system to give them information for how to go and answer this question now? Or is it just being,
How is it actually being manifested?
how is it being manifested? And is it being manifested really? Or is there a big landscape here?
I think there's a very big landscape, and I think that when you start to look at the typical, there's an infographic that I love by a guy, I think it's chiefmartech.com.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Scott Brinker.
Yeah,
right?
Scott Brinker. Yeah, he just
Love
wrote
this.
that big,
and it's this
all
huge,
those hundreds and hundreds of technologies.
Exactly.
Yep.
That's what the world is coming to, right?
That's
That's
right.
what's happening. All of these things are bubbling up and surfacing and being used all the time. So that shift, all of those tools are using big data. All of them are using in one way, shape, or form, right? In one way, shape, or form, right? I'm not saying that's maybe a blanket statement, but the point is that complex landscape is what we're starting to deal with, and it's weaving those things together to create that user experience. And we just talked about getting the right information to people when they need it.
Right.
That's modeling the user, it's modeling the content, and it's understanding their context. Well, we can do that with lots of systems.
That's right.
But it's very, very difficult, and it's difficult to get that real-time feedback. That's where things are going to be evolving to, right? Pulling all those pieces together in a more real-time fashion. What used to happen is you'd build a model, and it would take you weeks or months to build and validate that model. Well, now you don't have time for that, right? You have to be able to build and iterate and get that feedback right away. So that's what's going to happen. We're going to start to see that shrinking down and seeing these tools make almost real-time value, real-time use of that data.
Yeah.
All right, Seth, let's finish up with a question from our CMS-Connected audience, and this comes in from Amit Xerxes from Sapient Nitro in Delhi. And the question is, how are web content management and marketing automation vendors likely to respond to the need to adopt big data solutions to drive real-time contextualization and personalization?
That's kind of the path that I was starting to talk about. And I think what this is doing is it's starting to say, how can I build an adaptive model? How can I build a model that's going to take the user behavior as they're clicking through, as they're making choices, as they're purchasing or downloading or interacting, and how can I use that to adapt my model? There are lots of different types of machine learning algorithms that can help with that. But it's basically a form of predictive analytics, right? We're trying to model our users, we're trying to understand who they are, and something about their process, right? The way we use this is, we say, if I know who you are, and I know what you're doing, I can get an idea what you need and what you need next, and that's what I'm going to surface to you. I'm going to give you that thing that I think you need. I used to have an assistant who said, my job is to give you what you need before you know you need it. right?
And
That's
I
what we're
think you're
trying
so
to do.
right. And I just want to make one point here that I've made before, and I just recorded a My 5 and made this same point, which is that I really believe, and I think you'll do nothing but trumpet what I say here, but I really think that the day of reckoning is coming. And specifically, that question was, typical audience member who's thinking right now about content management systems, marketing automation. These are marketers in our audience oftentimes. The day of reckoning is coming where that phase 2, the inevitable time that I actually try to implement personalization that I've been talking about and that justified my many technology purchases over the past whatever, is coming where, because they haven't cared about the things that you do, metadata, taxonomy, how do I categorize my content, there's two things. Insights is one thing. Having the analytics to be able to help me understand who's working with, who's on the other end of the screen right now is one thing. But being able to deliver content then that feeds those insights is key, right? That's the part that nobody cares about.
I think it's not that they don't care. I think that they don't understand.
They don't know how to deal with it.
They don't know how to do it. And even when you start sitting down, and we were doing this just the other day with a client, we're doing use cases. We're saying, who are these users? Describe them. What do they need? Do they need this piece of content? What are they going to use this piece of content for? This is an organization whose job is to create thousands and thousands of pieces of content. And you know what they said? We've never looked at it that way before. We've never looked at it that way before. We've never looked at our content from that user perspective to say, what are people doing with it? And it's really understanding those users and understanding the tasks and the processes and the things they need, and then starting to surface that as you anticipate. It's understanding the user. It's understanding your customer.
Seth,
It's old stuff, but
thanks for your time on this edition of CMS Connected. He is Seth Earley from Earley and Associates. How do you prefer that people get a hold of you? We're going to show you a website
you
here.
could certainly go to the website, www.earley.com, and don't forget the E before the Y. Or you can certainly send me an email, seth@earley.com. So just don't forget that E before the Y. But I'd be happy to hear from anybody who has any questions.
Well, thanks for your time, and thanks for being a part of this edition of CMS Connected.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
All right, Seth Earley, and you can find him, Earley and Associates, on his website. As we now go into our Spotlight segment here on CMS Connected for this week's edition, we are going to talk about Magnolia in our In the Spotlight segment. For the In the Spotlight segment, Magnolia, with head offices in Switzerland and located in Spain, Czech Republic, and Miami, Florida. Magnolia is an open Java CMS that delivers smartphone simplicity on an enterprise scale. Their customers include ING Bank, Michelin, Pirelli, Sony, and the U.S. Navy. Magnolia is used by more than 100 countries across the world by governments and leading Fortune 500 enterprises. And now joining us in our In the Spotlight segment, our frequent contributor on CMS Connected here before to talk about Magnolia's CMS platform. He is from CMS Report. His name is Bryan Ruby. Hello, Bryan.
Hello, how you doing, Butch?
I'm doing great. How you doing today? You're always doing great.
I'm doing, yep, I'm always doing great.
So what do you want to tell us about Magnolia CMS? What do you want to focus on with them, Bryan?
Well, there's two things, a little bit on the software side and a little bit on the strategy side. On the software side, I know we're limited for time. So basically, one of the focuses on the software side of Magnolia is, we hear this mobile first, tablet first, and Magnolia actually did that as far as with Magnolia 5. They redesigned their software and they rebuilt as far as for the mobile device in mind. We hear a lot about that, and we hear a lot about content management systems that change so they appear better on the mobile device. Well, Magnolia, though, started from the ground up and redid as far as for the mobile stuff. So it's actually a much more mobile-driven content management system that's not only for displaying the data and consuming the data, but also to create the data. And so that's one of the benefits of that software. And the only negative on that, though, is it's got a little bit of a tile feel when you're looking at it through a browser, on your desktop.
Okay.
But it's kind of that Windows 8 feel a little bit on the tiles. But overall, it's a pretty good design. It works well, and it's very smooth in the tablet.
So after diving deeper into Magnolia, what other features stand out to you, Bryan, that are worth noting or passing on to other people?
Well, they've done as far as their customized apps, which is kind of a module plugin system that we're familiar with most content management systems. But they've kind of taken it more of a smartphone feel. When you add an app to your smartphone, you don't think about it. You just plug it in and it goes. And that's kind of a little bit what Magnolia is trying to accomplish with their rewrite of their software, where it's more you're focused on what you want to do and not necessarily how the software is going to do that for you. The other thing is they have a notification system that's integrated into the system. They call it the Pulse. With the Pulse, it may be a good name then. So that's another thing they're doing. But overall, their strategy for how they're dealing with the software is what's impressive. We go through this, whether it should be an all-inclusive software that does everything to just best in the breed. And Magnolia is very decisively focused on content management. Seth and Scott were talking about the need to do content management right if you want to do the rest of the stuff, and that's what Magnolia is focused on. This best of the breed approach. So it's not that they're not really. It's not that they're not understanding the benefits of e-commerce or customer experience management or big data. It's that they want to do that content management part right. So what they will do is they will take the features of some of these other platforms, and if it's a benefit to content management, integrate into their system. So for example, while they may not be gearing themselves towards the the consumer enterprise or consumer experience management platform, what they are willing to do and what they want to do, for example, in their next upgrade is focus on personalization, which is also important for content. It's important that as an individual, you're deliver the content that you find that's most important.
Okay, so a mobile-driven strategy. They're focused on content management. They have an eye towards personalization. Let's go the other end of this, though. What, in your opinion, is missing from Magnolia's solution?
They're rather new for North America. You've mentioned all those big sites like the U.S. Navy that they do and those type of things. Their Miami office right now, I talked to Boris Kraft, their CTO. He mentioned there's 6 people in Miami. They do have a partnership network program, but if you go to their site and you look at the partners for North America, I don't recognize them. I'm sure Scott probably does, but they're really needing to ramp up as far as people you're going to work with here in North America with their software. And Boris says that's what you're going to start seeing in 2014, 2015, this push towards North America as far as building up their partnership network.
So when they... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Brian. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so that's my only concern. It could be great software. People usually ask me, identify a great content management system. I do. And then the next question is, who do I work with on that? And so that's going to be Magnolia's big challenge.
So you mentioned that they'll be making the leap into North America. Right now, who are their top competitors, or who will be their top competitors?
Well, it's the market is wide. I think as far as if you're going to focus on the mobile type stuff, even in the demo that they mentioned Adobe, as far as Adobe's angle, as far as trying to get the mobile tablet device interface right. They believe, Magnolia believes that they're have a much better approach than Adobe.
How about the types of companies that should be looking at Magnolia, in your opinion?
I think those companies that that are finding that the big, large, all-in-one suites are so complicated, nobody can work with it. Those people that kind of want to get back to the basics and have a great content management system, they may want to look at Magnolia. It's if you're looking for an all-in-one suite, Boris will tell you you're looking at the wrong place. If you're looking at a company that knows how to do content management right, they're them.
So let's look into that Bryan Ruby crystal ball you were famous for and see what's down the road from Magnolia. You mentioned they'd be moving to North America. What else?
Well, like I said, they're going to have this push towards personalization in their 5.3 version, I believe. They also want to do better in integration. One of the things about best of the breed type software is you want to be able to integrate with the shopping carts and those type of things. And so they're really going to take another look as far as digital asset management. So that would be what we call CMS as a standard they're looking at. They're looking at improving their user interface, and they're also looking at kind of re-looking at how they hit what they call a content pool. how they do the content types, the tagging and the publishing, the taxonomy, and those type of things. So that, and those pretty much aren't necessarily brand new features for Magnolia, but they're features that they want to improve on.
So, we usually don't do this on this show, but I'm going to put your feet to the fire and sort of, in a black and white answer, thumbs up or thumbs down for Magnolia? It sounds like it's a thumbs up.
I think it's a thumbs up, but it's it's going to have that clause. It depends what your needs are. They seem to be the site that you want a strong web presence, but not necessarily the most complicated system to support that presence.
His name is Bryan Ruby from CMS Report. You can find him at CMS Report. Bryan, when people go there and when they find you, give yourself a plug. What else are they going to find when they start consuming all your articles and your blogs and your reviews?
Well, we try to do a mix of both news and blogging. So we try to do that mix, and I think one of the things I do is I also, as far as throw press releases out, as far as from different vendors, and one of the things we try not to do is rewrite it as if it's our own. There's a lot of we editorialize when we want to, but we also, as far as, are pretty clear that that this may be a marketing type thing.
Well, you guys do a great job, and you do a great job here as in our In the Spotlight segment on CMS Connected. Bryan, thanks for your time.
All right, thank you.
All right, Bryan Ruby from CMS Report. So there you go. Thumbs up from Magnolia.
Yeah, I think Magnolia is a really good product. It is a commercial open source product, like Bryan said. I think he's spot on when he talks about even the point that we just made with Seth earlier, right? Is that Magnolia focuses on storing content in the right way so that it can be accessed by whatever, but it's not going to bring you the personalization engine to make that access. It's not going to be the decision-making analytics engine. It's not going to necessarily have the marketing analytics capabilities. They're not trying to build all this into one piece. They're just trying to do a really great job at managing content. And oh, by the way, innovatively delivering on how you manage the content. They're kind of mobile first focus on the editorial.
So it seems to me some of the common things that you and Bryan are saying about Magnolia is while it may not be a comprehensive solution, there may be other things that other companies can do as a one-stop solution. The simplicity of it, the cleanness of it, if it's for the right people, that it's really, again, a thumbs up, right?
Yeah, I think what they do well is, marketability-wise, unfortunately, people do chase shiny objects, right? And other vendors have lots of shiny objects that they don't necessarily have, although they do have a really nice, slick interface. It's kind of the first of its kind. But they tend to chase those shiny objects, and they think that kind of traditional content management is no longer innovative. It's been done. And unfortunately, where they will fall down, that day of reckoning that comes, is you've got to be able to focus on doing the things that Magnolia helps you do well if you want to be able to have content ready and available to be delivered in real time based on all these other tools that are going to help you do that.
All right, that was our In the Spotlight segment here on CMS Connected. Time now for Rapid Fire. This is where we put Scott on the clock. It is our Rapid Fire segment on CMS Connected. Before we get to that, by the way, I use that expression all the time too. How do you eat an elephant? But it avoids the obvious question. Why would you ever eat an elephant?
Why would you even try? Yeah.
Unless if it was chocolate, maybe, right?
A chocolate elephant.
Yeah.
Yeah. A really big chocolate elephant.
Would still have to be eaten one bite at a time.
Absolutely. But is there anything that we don't, how do you put your pants on? Now we know why we want to put our pants on, although maybe
do we really
you're not wearing pants today.
Really
why don't you stand up for the crew and let them see that?
Time for Rapid Fire. Scott's avoiding it like the plague, but we're not going to let him do that. Okay, here's where we put Scott on the clock, and we start with our first story about Apple. We all know Apple. The next big thing, Apple relies heavily on hardware today to drive its high earnings. But as this quarter's earnings proved, relying on hardware sales alone might not be sustainable, and the future for Apple could be in content. Apple made around $25 billion from content and services in 2013, with significant growth from third-party content, video, apps, and services. However, it breaks down. If the numbers are correct, it's a fairly significant chunk of change, and it could represent a way out of the hardware box Apple finds itself in. Do you agree? Is Apple in a hardware box? Isn't that their foundation?
It is their foundation, but here's the thing with commoditization. They're on the natural curve of commoditization. All the times we come out and they've got this new innovative way of creating a great product that is unique. Then competitors catch up to you, they start delivering something similar, and your niche has to shift. You have to shift your business to kind of what is the next thing. I think Ron's point is that they're in that next part of their evolution. We've seen them start to think about iTunes and how it's now starting to stream music and stream content to you. Think about just how do you find that next app? I'll sometimes just spend time trying to figure out what's the next thing that I need. Its ability to know how I do what I do with my phone, take that insight and be able to give to me content, be able to give to me apps, content, music, whatever it might be that's in my interest based on my behaviors and my patterns, who's best to be able to take advantage of that insight? And certainly there's a huge monetization scheme behind that all sorts of app makers and segments are going to look for.
I know this is our rapid fire segment. I'm not supposed to comment, but as far as Apple, having to get out of this hardware box, I completely disagree because Apple is an experience like Amazon and Disney. And to me, one of the things that's made Apple unique or as part of the experience is you always do buy the hardware from Apple, unlike a lot of other companies. So I don't see it as a box.
Disrupted big time. Look at some of the numbers and look at what Samsung is doing and look at what LG is doing, some of their phones and stuff. It used to be that I don't want to quote numbers, but I think in a number of countries, like iPhone is now losing out. They cannot just focus there. If they took your strategy, unfortunately, it'd be a dime.
Rapid fire.
Sorry, dude. That's why you're a
today's
commentator and not a business leader. What? Sorry, did I
See,
say that out loud?
He can't take shots in rapid fire. Scott, how to eat an elephant is my fire.
You open the door.
Story number 2 in rapid fire, where we put Scott on the clock. This comes about Bitcoin, a bad month for them. On February 7th, Mt. Gox, the once popular exchange that hosted 80% of the world's Bitcoin trades, informed users they were temporarily halting withdrawals of the popular electronic currency from their service due to a technical problem called transaction malleability. This technical flaw allowed fraudsters to manipulate the unique ID of a Bitcoin transaction. They could make it appear as if the withdrawal never happened, even though they would still receive the funds. What does this mean for Bitcoin? Not good.
This isn't good for Bitcoin, and I think since February 7th, there's been a lot more recent announcements. I mean, they've got right now, the regulatory folks are looking in on them. The Mt. Gox has actually been shut down, I saw in the last couple of days, which have caused a significant decline. It was 80% of the trade market of Bitcoins. Here's the thing, why is this even relevant on a content management show? I'm not sure, but I'm gonna try to tie it together right now. Number one is, I think overall, just in general, what I don't want to see happen is something like Bitcoin, which is so much in the news and so out in front there, essentially cause us to question, as we did with cloud. You have every once in a while AWS or Amazon Web Services go down, and everybody's like, oh, the cloud is not, like, let's not overreact to this. I mean, this was always kind of it was a created market selling things that don't actually exist. I'm not saying it's doomed to failure. I'm not saying there's not another follower that's going to follow quickly. But the point is let's not take that and translate over into our world and say suddenly these things that we think we know, we don't know.
Rapid fire story number 3 here on CMS Connected has to do with a new face of Microsoft. Steve Ballmer announced his retirement last year as CEO of Microsoft, and the board of directors earlier this month announced its new selection for CEO. She is Satya Nadella as CEO effective immediately. What about her? What's the significance of this, Scott?
Yeah, Satya, I'm
sorry.
That's all right.
I did not know.
Can't get my name right, and we've worked together for so long. How could you possibly know? Anyway, Satya Nadella was the EVP of their cloud infrastructure business for a long time, has had a lot of successes in Microsoft, is kind of a geek by nature. I mean, again, geek I use as a term of endearment here, but is a geek by nature. I think here is the big shift that Microsoft has taken on. They are embracing the cloud. We've seen that before. As we mentioned on last month's show, the cloud is here to stay and it's not going away. And in fact, large staple companies like Microsoft are putting folks, in charge of this. We just talked about Box bringing on somebody to head up their cloud stuff. So this I think it's a good move for them. I don't really know the guy or his history, but it says that it's great. I think overall, though, what it means to the shifting of their business, though, I think is a really big key, is that we're seeing them completely transform. As we've talked about the theme of the show, we've talked about them transforming their business to be more appealing to consumers and deal with competitors and disruptors.
My sincere apologies, Satya, for that gender mix-up. Rapid fire story number 4. Our good friends at Acquia have another announcement. It's about Acquia Lift. Last week, they announced Acquia Lift, an optimization platform that, according to Dries and Tom and all the good folks over there, promises to make websites smarter, marketers more productive, and revenues greater. It will also grow hair, whiten teeth, and reduce body fat. I made those last 3 up. Significance of this story at Acquia. Scott?
I think, again, this is Acquia innovating in the open source world to take a product like Drupal, which was typically appealed to the likes of the geeks. Again, those are the people who are typically using it. If you go to Drupal world, the folks that you'll find there are mostly doers. They're technologists. And I think what Acquia really does is help to take those products which are built soundly by the community and has helped to position them in terms of what value do they bring to your organization. As they continue to move along and actually productize some of the Drupal offering, this is one new thing they're bringing to bear. The point that Bryan made about what Magnolia doesn't do, where they're trying to build out, they're not trying to go and build out a suite. Acquia, it looks like, is doing. They're building the ability to do analytics and personalization to kind of deliver that right offer, right time, and make their experience far more relevant. And they're packaging that in a pretty innovative way. And Acquia Lift, I think, not only is it a great move to help Acquia, who we've talked about, is on an IPO track to try to offer new services, but I think it continues to make a product that may not have been so relevant to line of business before, years ago now, extremely relevant to marketers.
2 final stories in our rapid fire segment here on this edition of CMS Connected. The first one has to do with an acquisition, and we get Scott's take on Oracle's buying in March. They have an insatiable need for acquisitions with a focus on anything involving marketing technology, and their latest deal is BlueKai, an acquisition announced this morning, and although terms of the deal were not released, it's estimated at $350 to $400 million for Oracle's acquisition of BlueKai. What's this mean, Scott?
I think it was announced last week, but the BlueKai acquisition is very similar, frankly. Acquia's stance was, we're going to go build something, we're going to go build some analytics capabilities and ultimately be able to figure out how to help organizations deliver the right content at the right time to the right company. Oracle's stance was, as often is rather than build it and innovate, is let's go buy it. They pulled out their checkbooks and, like you say, $350, $400 million, whatever it is. The point is, they went out again and bought a cloud-based service to help you do personalization and make your content more meaningful. This is, once again, Oracle's positioning to try to appeal more to line of business, to try to appeal more to the marketer, much like the acquisitions of Eloqua and Right Now and Responses, is as they continue to try to turn that ship. We've talked about this again, this has been a theme of the show, to try to turn that tide to no longer just appeal to the CIO suite, but also to the CMO and help to deliver some of that content. I think, again, for Oracle, as always, it comes down to, can they integrate with the rest of their suite?
Our final story comes from CMS Wire, but it is written by the CMO of company we previously just talked about, Acquia, Tom Wentworth, and it's the latest narrative on CMO-CIO collaboration, a subject that we talk about a lot here at the Pulse Network. And in Tom's article, Scott, he talks about how the silos have been broken down and how CMOs are so focused on what technology can do for their companies that they've become key decision makers in what technology is being implemented within an organization, and the CIO's role has always changed. There's so many talking points about this, but for the rapid fire segment and for the focus of Tom's article, what are your key points about this one?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially because Tom is a technologist. I think, by trade in the past, he's got a nice technology history, and he's a CMO of a technology company. So it's interesting. But listen, we've talked about the CMO and CIO relationship a lot in the past. I think it's a really bad idea. I was talking to a company that came out the other day, a really big hospitality company, who essentially had their CIO report into their CMO. And as I tweeted about publicly, I think that's a super bad idea. I don't think that the line of business should own this. I think IT has a real place in terms of helping companies figure out how they're going to transform their business and make use of digital disruption. I don't think it should just be driven by what features and functions and products can we go deliver to our audience. And I think the natural kind of chasm and the stress between those two parts of the organization are appropriate. I think, though, the CIO does need to change to be much more service-oriented rather than worrying about how they're going to stack up and hold up, data centers now. They're much more worried about how they can help their customers, their internal customers, deliver on their promise to the ultimate customer. And I think as we're going to see that, there will be some better models about how these guys work together to innovate truly and bring their customers into the next century.
All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of CMS Connected. We're done eating elephants with the new female CEO of Microsoft. And we have to check back into big data therapy, correct?
Exactly.
That's what we have to do from here. Those are our calls to action.
Those are our calls to action.
At the end of this show, we want to thank you for being a part of this edition of CMS Connected. We also want to take this opportunity to do two things on the way out the door. Number one, remind you that our next CMS Connected comes your way on March 20th. That's right, 12:30 Eastern Time live, Thursday, March 20th. And the topic of the next show is Video, the New Document. We will take a close-up look at how video is being managed and distributed in the enterprise CMS. Lisa Welchman will be in studio to join us, someone you're very familiar
She's got
with.
a great book coming out. She's the queen of web governance, so she'll be able to help us talk about that topic.
And great. And Video, the New Document is actually the title of a blog that our guest Seth Earley on today's show has written that he just informed me about. So we thank Seth Earley, we thank Bryan Ruby for being a part of this edition of CMS Connected. We thank you for being a part of it. And on the way out, we want to thank once again our leading sponsors of CMS Connected. That would be Falcon Software and Digital Clarity Group. So on behalf of all our guests and my co-host Scott Lewer, we'll see you next time. Get connected and stay connected. Stay out of therapy on CMS Connected.